Ooh, awesome. Part 2, The Anatomy of Lions, Chapter 7, Garrison Oaks. About 10 the next morning, Steve jogged into the weeds on the shoulder of Highway 78 and slowed to a stop. Acutely aware of his mug shots on CNN, he pretended to be really interested in something in the woods until the car coming up behind him passed. He was a cool It was a cool gray morning, just right for a run. Garrison Oaks came into view as he rounded this last bend, half a mile away and a little downhill. It didn't look like anything special. A couple dozen houses flanked the main drive in a neat row. Three secondary roads branches off it, terminating in cul-de-sac. Why did they separate it that way? Whatever. Some guy was out mowing his lawn. Yawn. Steve's burglary instinct reared up momentarily. The houses were okay, if a if a trifle on the modest side. But most of the cars out front were fading relics. A 1977 Cutlass Supreme, a blue Datsun, even a station wagon. Do they even make those anymore? A good rule of thumb he found was that if a dude has enough cash to drop on a new car, he also got enough to drop on electric gizmos, jewelry for his wife, and other pawnable stuff. The converse, he found, was also true. Nah, he thought, this place isn't worth robbing. Of course, this was no normal burglary. Among other things, he never carried a gun before. Carolyn hadn't thought to provide a holster, but 20 minutes in or so, Mrs. McGillicuddy's garage took care of that. How, he wondered, did humanity ever get along without duct tape? The makeshift holster was comfortable enough, but the thought of the pistol smoldered in the back of his mind. Dry leaves swirling around his feet as he moved, blown down from the bluff that flanked his course on the left. When he was 100 yards or so from the subdivision sign, he slowed to a walk, then unclipped Mrs. McGillicuddy's cell phone from the top of his sweatpants and punched numbers 1 on the speed dial. Home. Number 2 was someone named Kathy. The third slot was a funeral home. The other 5 slots were empty. He felt a little bad for Mrs. McGillicuddy. Carolyn picked up on the first ring. Steve? Yeah. Where are you? About 50 yards out, he said, clipping the phone back in his waistband. Mrs. McGillicuddy also had a Bluetooth headset, which he had found unopened in the box. Now it was clipped to his ear. Between that and the pistol, he felt like a mall ninja pretending to be a Secret Service agent. Okay, remember, when you get near the gate, you want to enter gradually. If you feel anything out of the ordinary, turn around and head back the way you came. Understood, he said. He brushed the Garrison Oaks sign with his fingertip as he passed. I'm in. Feel anything? Click. Nope, nothing. 2 steps. 3. He thought about asking her if she was sure the whole thing wasn't in her head. Then he looked down. The asphalt under his feet were dark with congealed blood. There was a lot of it. The question died in his mouth. How far in are you? Click. 20 feet or so. Okay, she said clinically. That means you're about that means you don't have the trigger. If you did, you'll feel it by now. Click. If you say so. Hey, what's that clicking sound I keep hearing? Margaret's playing with her lighter, Carolyn said, something in angry tone. The click stopped. Do you see anything unusual? Her voice was tense. The guy on the corner has a lot of dandelions in his yard, Steve said. A real infestation. I mean, is there anyone watching you? Anything like that? She spoke pleasantly enough, but it sounded like she was gritting her teeth. Steve, pleased to be getting under her skin, smiled in a way the Buddha would have disapproved of. Nope. There's a guy out mowing his lawn. He's the only one I see. What about dogs? Nope. Oh wait, there is one. Deep in the shadows, deep in the shadows of someone's front porch, there was a silhouette and eyes watching him. What does it look like? He's a pretty good size, maybe 80 or 90 pounds. Black, white, and tan fur. What do you call that breed? Bernese mountain dog, I think. Does he have one blue eye and one brown? I can't tell. Wait. The dog stood up, moved into the sunlight. Yeah. How did you know? Thane, Carolyn said under her breath. What? The dog name is Thane, she said. He's the Lord. The what? The pack lord. It's what they call. Never mind. He's the alpha dog. What's he doing? He's walking out into the yard, he said. Thinking of Petey, Steve waved. Hey, buddy. Are you insane? Don't engage with him, Steve. What? Why not? Carolyn sighed. Just trust me, please. Ignore the dog. Ignore any dog you see. She was gritting her teeth again. Okay, Steve said. Admittedly enough, he continued walking. After a few steps, he was in front of someone else's yard. This, a red brick house of old design, carved, double-doored in front, dark windows. It looked very familiar to him, though he didn't recall ever having been there before. The mountain dog followed him. He barked, just once. In response, another dog, Fat Beagle, came trotting out from behind this house. He ran up to Steve on comically stubby legs and set about giving a high alert. Sorry about that. Pretty good set of pipes on him for a little dude, Steve thought. Carolyn heard the bark. Is that a beagle? Yeah. Steve quicking his pace a little, hoping the dogs would leave him alone once he was out of the beagle's yard. But they followed, the beagle barking his surprisingly baritone bark. Thane watching him with one ice blue eye. Do you see any other? Steve didn't really want to take his eyes off the two immediate problems, but he heard the urgency in her voice. He glanced over to the other side of the street. A little ways ahead, a pair of Labrador retrievers, one black, one yellow, trotted alongside each other. They're pacing me. The hairs on the back of his neck stood up. Motion caught his eye. As he watched, a smallish German shepherd crest the hill in front of him. Seeing him, it barked once. Yeah, Steve said. 3 more. A lot of dogs in this neighborhood. Only 3? Yeah, well, 5 in all. How far are you? Almost a block. Coming up to the front intersection, he paused. Are these dogs known to, bite? Almost never. Almost never? Let me know when you get into the intersection. We'll see how they act then. Steve continued walking. Thane, the beagle, continued to follow alongside, though. Thankfully, the beagle shut up when they were all well outside his territory. The labs paced him on the other side of the street. Now he was up to the old guy mowing his lawn. He was a 60-ish man, probably retired, wearing a baseball cap and work boots. Are these your dogs? Steve called, forgetting momentarily that he was a fugitive who didn't want to draw attention to himself. The old guy waved. Hey, buddy, can you call off your dogs for me? The old guy wrinkled his face in confusion, put his hand to his ears. I can't hear you. He didn't shut off the mower. Can you call off your dogs? Steve said, louder. The old man shook his head again, smiled, pointing to the noisy engine. Asshole, Steve muttered. He was walking very slowly now. The mower noise receded as the old man mowed down to the far end of the yard. The dogs matched Steve inch for inch. What did you say? Nothing, never mind. I'm almost there. Okay, I'm at the intersection. Hold up there for a second. What are the dogs doing? The two labs have trotted up to the German Shepherd, and there's a new one in the mix. Some sort of black and white breed. Maybe an English Spaniel? Mid-size. Are these like guard dogs? Not the way you mean. Try taking a couple steps forward. Steve did. The reaction was immediate and furious. The four dogs in front of him went from passive watching to full-on attack, barking and sprinting at him. At the same time, the big mountain dog leaped up and clammed down on Steve's arm. The beagle latched onto the tongue of Mrs. McGillicuddy's son's Reebok. Ah! Steve screamed, as much of a surprise of actual pain. The pain arrived in a second, though. Dane, the mountain dog, had snuck his teeth into the meat of Steve's upper right arm. Now he dangled there. All 90 pounds of him pulling on the tricep. Steve's elbowed him furiously, then reached around with his left arm to loosen the jaw. The dog's brown eye rolled at him, darkeningly furious. Steve's blood stained the white fur of his muzzle. What's happening? Carolyn said. Steve? He was making some progress on the dislodging of the mountain dog when the other four hit. The yellow lab bit down on his left forearm. The black lab latched onto his left ankle. The shepherd went for his left butt cheek, but almost just got the cloth of his sweatpants. It whipped his head back and forth. Steve's heard cloth tear, felt cool autumn air on his ass. Steve? Steve, answer me. What's happening? Is it the dogs, Steve? These dogs mean to kill me. The thought carried a burst of adrenaline. He gyrated, trying to shake them loose, but they hung on him like Christmas ornaments. He lurched a step back in the direction that he had came, thinking hysterically that might do the trick. Convinced them to let go. All this happened in silence. The dogs weren't barking anymore because they had their mouth full. The pain was not yet so bad that he needed to scream again. The only sound was a lawnmower. He took another step. The beagle let go of his shoe and clamped down on Steve's Achilles tendon. The pain drove him to his knees and maybe he tripped. The mountain dogs let go of his right arm and bit on his ear, his scalp, his face. Steve struck out blindly, punching with his right hand. Now he was screaming. That's it, Carolyn said. I'm sending him back up. Part 2. Facing down on the asphalt, buried underneath the marauding dogs, Steve felt surprisingly peaceful. He heard the blood roaring in his ears, but felt no real pain. Probably, I'm dying. He noticed a piece of gypsum baked into the asphalt of the road, inches away from his eyes. It was very interesting. Then, as if from the giant distance, he heard a sound that was not a dog, not a lawnmower. It was a bass rumble, a roar he felt in the depths in his chest. A moment later, the shadow of the mountain dog, Thane, Steve thought his name was Thane, fell away from his face unexpectedly. He was in daylight again. The dogs on his right arm fell away. Then his left leg was free. Ah, you hear me, Steve? Answer me. Are you? Steve, dazed, put his right arm down on the asphalt, examined it. He had a good wide gash on his arm. When he flexed his finger, he could see the muscle work. Not much blood though. The muscle of his forearm looked like it was raw chicken. He found this very interesting as well and clenched his hand a couple of times to watch it work. The gun, Steve. Use the gun. Hey, that's a pretty good idea. He put a hand down and pushed himself off the asphalt. The old man mowing the lawn was headed in his direction. Steve waved him over for help with one bloody, shredded hand. The old man smiled and waved back. He cupped a hand to his ears and shook his head, pointing at the lawnmower. What the fuck? That was weird enough to bring him back to himself, at least a little. He got on one knee, took a quick inventory. His right leg worked. The beagle hadn't been able to do much damage to his ankle. Not for the lack of effort, though. His left? Not so much. He's been badly bitten on the calf. It hurt to put weight on it. Wonder what happened there. The gun, Steve! The gun! Shoot the dogs! That did it. Steve, fully conscious again, remembered who, what, had done this to him. He was suddenly and acutely aware of the slavering dogs in his back. Black murder bubbled up in his heart. The Buddha's message of compassion for all life temporarily forgotten. Come here, Thane, he said, drawing the pistol. I got a treat for you, buddy. Wow, he thought. That's a real big dog. Must be, what, 400 pounds or so? Maybe 500? But of course, that was not a dog. It was a lion. Two of them actually, an adult male and a thick brown mane and a smaller female standing between him and the dogs. Lions? Huh? That's kind of unusual. He pulled the slide back of the HK, cocked it. He leveled it, aiming at the center of the big lion's mane, carefully squeezing the trigger off a shot. He missed completely. The bullet went between the lions, ricocheted off the asphalt, kicking up the small spark. The big lion turned around and roared at him. Steve! Carolyn's voice came to the air. What are you doing? Don't be an idiot. They're there to protect you. They're your backup. Say again, please. The lions saved you. They're your backup. Don't shoot them. How did you know I tried? The big lion roared again. He says there's more dogs on the way. Can you shoot? Use the gun. But be careful. How many dogs are there? Steve took stock. The beagle lay dead on the road, his back broken, Thane bleeding from the wound on in his ass, the fur on the back of his neck high. Paced back and forth in front of the lions, studying them with his eerie, mismatched eyes. Behind him, the other 4 dogs stood, growling, slightly wounded, uncertain. 3 new ones, 2 Rottweilers, a poodle, had arrived while Steve was out of it. As he watched a golden retriever crest the hill, I count 9. Shoot, Kaylin said. You're going to have to fight your way out of the street. Steve squeezed off a shot at the English spaniel. He missed, this time too. But this was a more credible effort. The big lion glanced over his shoulder and moved further out of Steve's field of fire. The spaniel was growling his muzzle wrinkled back, stained red with Steve's blood. It barked, took a half step forward, and Steve shot it right between the eyes. The lion roared their approval. Steve glanced off to his right. The guy with the mower had completed another round and turned around. This time, Steve waved twice as he passed by. Once at Steve and once at the lion. Steve shot the yellow lab in the side. It took a couple of steps forward and fell to his side, ribs heaving. I'm getting the hang of this. He fired at the black dog and missed completely, then shot it at the hip. It screamed, then began limping towards him. He shot it in the breastbone and it fell down dead. The remaining 6 dogs charged. 3 of them attacked the female lion, swarming her. She roared in pain, but Steve didn't care because the other 3 charged them, bypassed the male lion. Steve didn't really blame them. It was becoming evident that he wasn't much of a shot. He shot the poodle in the chest, not bad. He shot at Thane, missed him completely. The shepherd, snarling and yellow-eyed, launched at him, launched herself at him. He held his wounded arm up to block, and she latched onto it, sharp white teeth sinking into exposed muscles. Steve screamed. He jammed the pistol into her belly and pulled the trigger. Guts showered out the other side, but the shepherds didn't let go. Now a pit bull was gnawing at his ankles that the beagle had been on. He shot again, higher on the shepherd's body. The hammer clicked. The hammer clicked down on an empty chamber. The dog, to be nearly dead, but it just wouldn't let go. The bite felt like it was being on fire. Steve screamed again, clubbing her in the head with the butt of the gun. "Yah!" he screamed. "Fucking get off me, asshole!" With a look of surprise, the shepherd fell away. Steve plopped down on his ass and began kicking the pit bull with his free foot. It gnawed at him, sunk his teeth in deeper. Steve screamed. Then the 2 lions landed on the pit bull. A split second apart, Steve screamed again. Lion attacks with all that to a person. But they didn't touch him at all. Instead, they took the dog's spine in its jaw, one near the neck and one near the tail, and crunched down. Now it was the dog's turn to scream. "Yeah, you fucker." When they dropped the dog, it didn't move. The lions turned and stood over him, inches away now. Their yellow eye bore into him. They were panting. He felt their breath over his wound. The slick sweat of his brow, the smell of blood and rotten meat. Steve held up an empty pistol, then lowered it again. The big one rumbled a little, swishing his tail. He stood a step back, then raised his head and looked down the street, his brow furrowed. Not wanting to, Steve twisted and followed his gaze. Behind him, there was a dozen more dogs, 10 at least. Behind them, dozens or even hundreds more were on the way. They followed out of the woods, half a mile away, like a river of murder across the field, down the main road. The clicking of their toenails on asphalt sounded like a stampede. "Oh shit," Steve whispered. The lion roared. Steve stood up. He fumbled at his back. Carolyn had duct taped the 2 extra mag there, like Bruce Willis did in the original Die Hard. It seems like a good idea at the time, but when he gripped at one of the magazines, it wouldn't come unstuck. He pulled again, harder this time. This time, it came loose, but the magazine Carolyn had given him were slick with gun oil. It slipped out of his grip and cluttered across the road, coming to a rest not far from the street lamp. "Oh, shit," Steve said again. "What happened? What's going on?" "They're coming. There's hundreds of them, and I dropped the fucking magazine." As he spoke, he reached around, carefully this time, and pulled his hand on the final magazine, taped to his back. He wrapped his finger around it, gently, but firmly, pulled it free. Carolyn, exhausted, softly, "You have to get inside," she said. "Get inside, Steve. Get inside." "Where?" "Anywhere. Wherever's closest. There's no lock. Go." Steve took off, limping at best. Limping at best was able across the half-mowed yard. He moved. He took the duct tape still clinging to the full magazine in his teeth and pulled. It came off. Behind him, he heard a thunder of running dogs, 100 more reinforcements coming to join the dozen already standing shoulder to shoulder 20 yards away. Only the line stood between them and him. The old guy mowed the yard, waved again. You're an asshole, Steve yelled. The old man cupped a hand to his ear. He pointed at the mower and shook his head. Steve, get indoors. Carolyn's voice was thick and tension. You have to get indoors now. Still moving, Steve ejected the spent magazine. Let it drop to the grass. I hope it messes up your mower blade. He slammed the full magazine home and jacked the slide back, cocking the gun. Now he was on the porch. He put his hand on the knob, fully prepared to shoot it if it was locked. Surely that will work. It always works in the movies. But the door opened easily into the unremarkable foyer. Aluminum floors, floral wall, dusty umbrella stand. What about the lines? Leave them. They're disposable. Just get indoors. Steve lurched inside, shutting the door behind him. I'm in. Okay, you're safe. Which house are you in? The outside is white brick. Perfect. There's food, water, and medical supplies in the living room. Stay there. You'll be safe inside. I'll get you out of there as soon as I can. But it might be a day or two. She hung up. Part 3. Shit, Carolyn said in Palapi as she hung up the phone. She, Jennifer, David, Margaret, Rachel, Peter were sitting around Mrs. McGillicuddy's kitchen table. The others could tell from her tone that things had gone bad, but none of them understood more than a smattering of English. What happened? David rumbled. He ducked into one of the houses. She stood and walked over to the wall where the phone's cradle hung. When she seated the phone, she also unplugged Jack. No one noticed. The librarians weren't much good with technology, nor was Mrs. McGillicuddy. Nor was she, for that matter. But she had time to read up on telephones. The other phone jacks in the house were already unplugged. Well, David said reflectively, I suppose it was going to be one of two. Margaret, which do you think would be worse? Ripped apart by dogs or gummed to death by the dead ones? He tickled her. She giggled and squirmed, unsettling in a small cloud of flies. Wouldn't you? She giggled again. Jennifer slapped her forehead. Oh no. Didn't you warn him? Are you going to want him back, Carolyn? Because that's going to be a real mess. The dead ones would be friendly to strangers they encountered outside the house. If someone odd, but on the rare occasion that some unfortunate soul from the outside world made it indoors, they fell on him with teeth, hand, clubs, kitchen tools, whatever was handy. Unless someone intervenes quickly, there usually wasn't much left. Carolyn shrugged. He's disposable if we get in there in the next little bit maybe. Otherwise, as far as I'm concerned, he can stay dead. So, new plan? Oh, I don't know. I think the basic plan is solid. The problem was that he didn't ignore the sentries. What did he do? He spoke to Thane, almost the first thing. Jennifer winced. Carolyn felt her index finger about to tremble. It never occurred to me to warn him. This was plausible. Most of the librarians had an horror of neighborhood dogs that dated back to childhood. Even Michael tended to keep his distance, but Americans for some reason seemed to love the furry little bastards. It was one of their unfathomable quirks. So what then? Unless anybody can think of something better, I guess I'll go out there and see if I can round up another American. She lied. David, does that suit you? David, perhaps thinking of the bloodbath at the jail, blessed this with a shallow nod. When will you go? Jennifer asked. Carolyn thought about this. Now, I suppose. Want to wait for a bit? There will be food soon. Mrs. McGillicuddy was bustling in the kitchen. Carolyn groaned. No, I've already eaten twice today, and I may have what? And I may have to do bar snacks. Has anyone seen those boots I had on? And the blue duffel bag with all the green paper? I'll need it as bait. Carolyn collected her things and emerged into the afternoon sunshine. That went rather well, she thought. Mission accomplished, and Steve is in a safe place. It was true that the dead ones were fierce defenders of their quarters. It had to be that way. Their private lives could not bear much inspection. But there were exceptions. The librarians could come and go as they please, as could others who had been resurrected. Steve will be fine. The others didn't know this, of course. Chapter 4. I mean, Part 4. Steve gave the interior of the house a quick glance. Weirdly empty, and turned to the door. It had one of those little peephole things that gave a fisheye view of outside. The two lines were about 5 yards from the porch, backing up slowly. It wasn't hard to see why. Now there were at least 100 dogs in the streets, all of all size and description. Doberman, Jack Russell Terriers, poodles, both large and small, German Shepherds, Labs of the chocolate, yellow, and black variety, dozens of other breeds. They were advancing on the lines. The big male looked back and forth over the assemble of dogs and gave a full-throated roar. The sound echoed down the street, bouncing off the house of Garrison Oaks. The female looked over her shoulder. At the door, her gaze seemed to bore into Steve. The look in her eyes reminded Steve of something, but he couldn't quite think of what. Fuck. What do I do here? The lions have saved him, but, they're fucking lions. Still, he has been down for the count, barely conscious as the dogs tore into him. That reminds me. He looked down. He was dripping blood on the floor, but not actually spraying it, as far as he could tell. That was probably good, and Carolyn had said that there were medical supplies. Medical supplies. That's suspiciously convenient then. God, I hate her. A lot. Outside the door, a low rumble was building. The sound of 100 dogs growling at once over that lawnmower. The female lion stood in the old man's path, teeth bared, fur up. He just stared around her. He didn't seem to notice the dogs at all. The male lion took another half step back. Thane advanced 2 steps. The rest of the dogs closed behind him. One of the Rottweilers barked mechanically over and over, spraying flecks of white foam. The yard was a sea of wrinkled muzzle, fangs, savage eyes. Yeah, they're fucked. Even if the lions had somewhere to run, which they didn't, they had cornered themselves, covering Steve's retreat. He had no doubt that at least some of the dogs could outrun them, and there were so many. Steve pounded the wall. Fuck! He thought about dialing Carolyn back, but there wasn't time. The big lion took another step back, roared again. The Rottweilers charged him, and he swatted it, sent it flying into the crowd. The female looked over her shoulder again. Steve would have sworn she was reproached in those eyes. Wasn't there a thing on YouTube a couple years back about lions and some English dudes buddying up? Steve thought hysterically. Oh, fuck it. He opened the door. The female lion looked at him. Possibly he was kidding himself. But, he thought, she looked grateful. Get in here. What are you waiting for? She tried to bound, but her hind legs wasn't quite up for it. She did a belly flop onto the brick porch, then scrambled up. The male wasn't wounded, but He waited for her to get inside. Some of the dogs were just inches from him. He held them at bay with swipes of his paw, and Steve thought the force of his personality. Come on! The male spun and was through the door with a quick two leap. Steve, standing between the door, tried to slam it shut, but was thralled, but was thwarted by the dogs. Two of them, both greyhounds, were pinned neck deep between the door and the jamb. They snarled and snapped. Steve kicked at their heads with his good leg, holding himself up with the door. He kicked the top of the greyhound unconscious and possibly to death. When he let the pressure off the door, the other one backed out. He was about to shut the door. Then there was a lot of dogs outside, but for whatever reasons, only a couple of them had come into the porch. They scrambled ineffectively against the door with their toenails. He made an extra special sure that the latch caught, then released the handle. He locked it, then threw a deadbolt for good measure. The dogs outside clambered at the door, barking. Steve leaned against the wall and turned to see if the lions would eat him now. They didn't. They ignored him completely, actually. The female had collapsed in the living room. She had a biggish chunk missing from her left rear leg. Blood wasn't spurting from the wound, but it was oozing out in a steady stream. A red trail led from the foyer to where she lay. Right, Steve thought. Medical supplies. Carefully, keeping one eye on the line, he limped into the living room. It was still bright outside, but in the house it felt like twilight. Thick curtains hung over all the windows, and there was no light on. He fumbled around the walls until he found a row of switches and flipped at random until one worked. A single anemic bulb came on overhead. Its dull dull ultra its dull glow further diluted by the husk of the dead insects in the fixture. Whoa, Steve said. The living room was flat, empty space about the size of a two-car garage. All the furnitures were heaped in a corner, couch standing on one end, squished lampshade poking out from the splintered bookcase, end table leg jutted out like a skeletal figure. The ghosts of the couch lingered as a cleaner spot on filthy carpet. The framed photograph and arts were in a pile as well, but the room was not undecorated. Most of the wall space was covered with crude painting that looked like the work of a talented kindergartner. No, Steve thought, that's not quite right. They look like cave paintings. These images had the same crude style, but they were not of animal. Well, mostly not. He saw a few four-legged beasts here and there, possibly dogs, but mostly these cave paintings were of modern things. He recognized the square brown of the UPS truck, a small car with a sign on the roof that's a stick-figure man bearing pizza beside it, a mail truck, a baseball hoop, a bicycle. But among the recognizable and commonplace stuff of American life, there were inexplicable things as well. A black pyramid, a yellow bull standing in a fire, angry calamari blobbing in the green wave. He found the supply Carolyn had mentioned, stacked nearly in the corner opposite the furniture. 2 cases of Dasani water, a case of Johnson & Johnson sterile gauze, two industrial size box of Band-Aid, a plastic bag full of beef jerky, what looked like a tackle box with a red cross stenciled on it. A plain white box held collections of less familiar things, neatly wrapped in an old wedding dress. Three clay pots, a styrofoam tray of glass ampoules, tiny bowls of powder. This stuff's fresh, looks like. It's been here a day or two at most. Steve walked over and spun the cap off at Dasani, guzzled it. He opened a band-aid box, peeled one, and stuck it over a little bite mark on his finger. Another box said amoxicillin. He opened it and found a dozen syringes. Oh, hello. Steve, startled, spun around. It was an older woman, mid-60s, in a flower print skirt and pants combo, mostly purple. She herself was very pale, her lips a cyanic blue. How lovely to see you. Won't you come in? May I take your coat? Oh, hi. I didn't realize anyone was here. I'm sorry. I'm sorry to break in. Really. There are dogs. Won't you come in? I don't. He stopped, squinted at her. He thought of how the mower guy kept pantomiming deafness, pointing at the mower over and over, like it was the first time. His wife, maybe? They're perfect for each other. Won't you come in? She said again. How lovely to see you. The lion walked over, sniffed her. She looked down at the 400-pound cat bleeding in her foyer and patted his thick, dusty mane. May I take your coat? The lion looked over his shoulder at Steve and gave a dubious rumble. Steve shook his head. Beat the shit out of me, man. The big cat swished his tail at Steve's word agreeably enough, as if he understood. Maybe not the words, but the gist of his thoughts. The sentiment. For some reason, this struck Steve as funny. When the sound of his chuckle prompted the woman to ask again if she might take his coat, he laughed long and loud. Maybe he was getting the hang of this weird-ass day. End of chapter 7. I totally forgot about this invasion of dogs and the hundreds. I love this series, right? And how imaginative. Like, guard sentry dogs, yeah, that's totally awesome, right? But then also keep in mind that, oh yeah, on the opposite end, we have, in case of invaders, now you're hurting imaginary sentry dogs, right? Like, oh, no, damn it, right? But just thinking of 100 of them, like, out from the horizon, rumbling down the streets, right? Like, oh my God, that's crazy. And you have two lions to protect you, right? One adult and one young. Uh, very, very imaginative stuff that's fun, besides the whole bleak uh, scenario, right? Circumstance. But yeah, the this chapter, when I first read it, was I didn't know how to. I didn't know where it was gonna go. Right? It was like, oh, and when they introduced a line earlier, I was like, oh, so that's what they wanted. That was part of the agreement, right? What they had freed them for, and this little escapade to recover the was it I the Isaac Ariel? I forgot what was it called, but yeah. Um, ooh, what a chapter though. Can't wait to find out what happens further, and I hope not the Thorn of Dawn, but uh, shoot, I forgot her name. The young lion. I should know this because they made a joke earlier with Dresden and something something kaboom. Come on, memory work itself. I'm desperately flipping through trying to find a name. I'm so embarrassed to not remember. I can't be the only one that's bad with names, right? 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 Don't leave me, guys. Anyways, the Lucky's Chicken. Nagasaki. Nagasaki, right? Anyways, yes, Nagasaki's hurt. Thorn of Dawn Dresden is there watching, kind of monitoring Steve. Not yeah, Steve to help grab some medical supplies. And it seems like Carolyn and the gang is already moving on to I guess plan B. Or so it implies. Anyways, end of chapter 5. Chapter 8 next time will be called Cold Home. Till then.